morning, everybody. It's great to see all you amazing, beautiful people out there. Well, like we said, I'm Eddie Yancey III.
I'm Helen Montgomery.
And we were speaking of birthdays or whatever, whatnot. And the funny thing about us is that we were born on the same day, also same year, as well as the same hospital. So basically, probably both of our parents were in the nursery together, and we were raised and everything. So it's pretty awesome that we have the exact same birthday. And Mary Helen was like the first person I've ever met in life history that I have the exact same birthday with.
So we were probably in the hospital nursery together, but we never officially met until a couple years ago. I was working at the Times Free Press, and my editor had suggested talking to Eddie for background for his story, so we met out for lunch at a super salad out by Hamilton Place Mall. And we started talking about Chattanooga, and Eddie wasn't in the story or anything, but after we met, we kept in touch, and we kept these conversations going about Chattanooga and about the different ways that we saw our shared hometown that we both grew up in.
Yeah, so basically we just kept talking about two Chattanoogas, and we both saw the city divided by education, housing, and money, amongst other things. And we were really interested in how race affected those differences that we saw. And at the end of the day, we wanted to know, how does segregation impact our day-to-day lives? And honestly, at the end of the day, what can we do about it?
So we actually just got in the car one day because we wanted to explore Chattanooga together, because we knew we would see things in different ways. And we were kind of comfortable, I think, in different parts of town, too.
Yeah.
And so we went with our friend Shone Aaronlee, who some of you know probably. We got in the car, and we started downtown at the intersection of Market Street and Main Street. And we decided we were just going to drive north, south, east, and west. And in each direction, we were going to get out of the car and just get out in the neighborhood and start talking to people about where they live. So that's what we did. And we also took some audio recording equipment with us. So we're going to play you some of the tape that we recorded that day. I forgot to set the audio up here. 1 second. Oh. Can I?
Give us a round, come on. Woo!
Can you hold that for a second?
I feel like it's our birthday all over again.
Okay. All right, so this is us driving around in the car. Okay, so we're going to turn into the Coin Laundry on Market and West 25th Street here. They're going to be skeptical of us. Yeah, exactly.
So then we went into a laundromat on Market Street, right across from my alma mater that's near and dear to my heart, Howard High School. And we met a guy named Jamie who was doing laundry. So we wanted to ask him his thoughts about the neighborhood and what did he feel about being in the area.
This is probably the worst part of Chattanooga there is, you know what I'm saying? Yeah, you just look at the south side and tell that they need help, you know what I'm saying? The economy, housing. I mean, just take a look around.
What kind of stuff do you see when you look around here?
Just poverty. That's all you see is poverty. You see, they looked out for Chattanooga as far as downtown. You know what I'm saying? But you threw everybody else, you know what I'm saying? To the wolves. So, you know.
Jamie was not the only person we talked to that day who felt like their neighborhood had been neglected or thrown to the wolves, as he said, as downtown was thriving with tourism and new tech business.
And then we went a mile down the road to Jefferson Heights near Main Street. Now, growing up, Jefferson Heights was completely different than what it is now. And when we went to the neighborhood, that was my first time going in like forever. And when I went in there, I was like, wow, you know, this is actually like a neighborhood that you could probably see on the front of like a residential prominent magazine around the country, like what you would see like in San Francisco, fronts and stuff like that. So it was really interesting when we went back in the neighborhood to check it out.
And so we walked out to the playground there, and we met a mom playing with her twin toddlers.
Well, it's a very interesting neighborhood because there are a lot of older houses and a lot of new houses. And if you go one block in either direction, you're going to find a completely different kind of neighborhood.
This block was definitely a lot different than the area where we went to the laundromat. The laundromat was surrounded by a lot of gloom, blight, housing, disrepair, and it was complete opposite sides of the spectrum.
And so we learned a lot driving around town and talking to people, but a lot of what we learned about Chattanooga was just from conversations with each other we were having in the car about how we saw different parts of town. And we kept those conversations going after that day, and we just started meeting up more and talking about our city more.
Yeah, so we basically just started hanging out more, kicking it more, and we realized that, we got good vibes off each other. You would say so, right?
Yeah.
Cool. So at the end of the day, the funny part was that we found out that we had similar backgrounds, and our lives in Chattanooga were vastly different because of, our upbringing, but in a sense, it was weirdly parallel.
Yeah, both of our families have lived in Chattanooga for generations. I mean, over 100 years. And I went to GPS, same as my mom and my grandmother and my great-grandmother.
And I went to Howard High School, again, my awesome alma mater, with my dad and my granddad going there as well. And even though Mary Helen and I grew up a few miles from each other, our outlooks growing up in our respective neighborhoods were totally different. I remember growing up in St. Elmo, which isn't too far from here. I kind of felt like my neighborhood was a neighborhood within a neighborhood, so kind of like a sub-neighborhood, because on my street, it was mostly black families, and the two adjacent streets probably were black families as well, but it's like the rest of the neighborhood was filled with, white families and whatnot. So it was real interesting, just leaving the neighborhood every day and going to school, grocery shopping and whatnot, and just, seeing those optics of the visual differences that I saw just on my street compared to the rest of the neighborhood.
And when he brought that up, I started thinking about my neighborhood where I grew up on Lookout Mountain, and it was kind of the same situation. Vast majority white families, and there were some black families, and a lot of them lived in the same area, so it was sort of like two neighborhoods within a neighborhood. And my elementary school where I went up there was almost entirely white kids, more than 95% white. And Eddie's elementary school, he told me, was
majority
basically
black as well.
Yeah, mostly black kids.
All right, so a little history for you guys. Back in the 60s, when our parents were in school, the law required separate schools for black and white kids. Legal segregation ended before we were born, but when we were growing up, the effects were still there. And this kind of segregation that still exists today has a negative impact on a lot of aspects of African Americans' lives in Chattanooga, as well as the different resources that are available to them. And I know just personally firsthand, I still connect with like a lot of my high school friends, people I grew up with, and like all the stuff that's going on, like in Chattanooga, it's real interesting. It's kind of sad that they don't know a lot of stuff that goes on here, like as far as like stuff that goes on with like, the incubators and all the resources that go on, whatever, whatnot. So
CreativeMornings,
stuff that goes on, with the Edney building, the revitalization of Main Street and MLK. So, just seeing that kind of breaks my heart a little bit to know that, a lot of them don't know all the stuff that goes on.
And so one of the things we started thinking about was how the ways that we're segregated with schooling and housing affects our social connections and just like who we're friends with and who we know and who we can connect with.
And I know, like, growing up, another kind of interesting experience I had was like my high school. 9th and 10th grade, I went to Notre Dame, and 11th and 12th grade, I went to Howard. And a lot of people ask me, well, why did you leave going to Notre Dame and go to Howard? Well, growing up, I went to inner city school my whole life. I went to Calvin Douglaston Elementary and Franklin Middle, so, that was my comfort zone. That's what I was used to. And going to a private school from inner city school my whole life, that, was a big culture shock to me. And I wasn't as comfortable going to my private school as I was going to my public education. So I consider growing up a lot of my school friends that I went to Howard with as friends because I would go to their house, we would play in the neighborhood and whatnot. As Notre Dame, I really didn't hang out with any of them outside of school, except for honestly the black kids. That's my comfort zone.
And so what Eddie's saying, like that he would go to black friends' houses but not white friends' houses, got me thinking about my life. And I want you guys to think about your lives too, and who you're friends with from different backgrounds. And maybe you do have good friends who have different backgrounds, but I'm guessing chances are most of the people that you're good friends with that you have into your house have a similar background as you, if you're like most people that we know here in Chattanooga. So we started talking about this kind of thing a lot, and I realized that outside of my job as a journalist, I really hadn't been into many black people's houses. So I'm going to play you a clip of a conversation Eddie and I had that is a little vulnerable.
I was trying to think about, it's hard to even talk about it because I feel embarrassed, but I'm trying to think about what black people I've been to their houses. Don't you think it's kind of shocking, like, that I've only been to, like, one black person's house?
I don't really think it's shocking because it's like I can say honestly in Chattanooga, maybe correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't really think there are too many events or venues or restaurants or meeting places or whatever that promotes diversity when it comes to having like that conversation. Because honestly, truth be told, there just aren't a lot of places where black people and white people get together in Chattanooga.
And so as we were having these conversations, we heard about a guy in Chattanooga who's trying to change that. He's actually here today. His name's Franklin McCauley. And we heard that he had noticed the same kind of thing, this social divide. And so we had to go talk to him.
And one Saturday morning, we went to Franklin's house to talk to him, to pick his brain a little bit, to get feedback. He's a retired educator. He lives with his wife in a renovated historic home not too far from here in downtown Chattanooga. And we sat down in his living room to chat, and the funny thing, it turns out that Franklin actually taught my dad, and he remembered my name. So he was like, "Hey, Yancey, that name sounds real familiar." And it turns out it was my dad.
And Franklin told us that when he was growing up here, he was raised to be racist.
I was taught racism by my family, my mother and father, my church, my friends, my schools, everybody. I was a segregationist. I was a Confederate flag raiser and waver. I used the N-word and told N-jokes.
But when Franklin went to school, he began to interact with some students in college from a nearby historically black college. It was the first time in Franklin's entire life that he sat down with someone to actually tell him what it felt like to be black in the South growing up.
For all my life, I've been lied to.
In 2011, Franklin and his wife moved back to Chattanooga, and they were so shocked to see that the city's race relations weren't much better than when they were here before in terms of where black and white people socialize with each other.
We go to the symphony, there are 1,000 white people and 10 black people.
And then at a retirement party for a community leader,
There were 250 black people and 2 white people. We began to ask that question. Why aren't black and white people together? And as we asked black and white friends, they said, Franklin, we're not friends here. We don't get together here. We don't know each other. We are not comfortable with each other.
all right, so then Franklin had this idea. Why not start throwing parties at our home where it'd be half white guests and half black guests? And Franklin, about how many of these parties would you say you've had?
22 and over 500 different people, maybe 1,000 people.
Wow, that's real impressive. Gotta give you a hand clap for that. That's awesome. Yeah, give them a hand clap for that.
Now, some people have asked us, what good does that do? We have found when you build friendships, good things start to happen all over the city in terms of cordiality, just in restaurants and meetings, but also in business, in employment. There are people now, black people, who are getting jobs. We know some. Not hundreds yet. They're getting jobs because we've broken the color line in friendship.
So the conversation that Eddie and I had with Franklin that morning really inspired us, and it actually inspired us to throw our own party. And if you remember, we have the same birthday, and last fall on November 3rd, we were both turning 30. So we decided to have a joint birthday party together. We didn't really know what it was going to be like because most of our friends had never met each other, and we expected it might be a little awkward, but we thought it would be really fun. So we planned this joint birthday party together.
And the funny thing, I think this probably was like the first time I've ever had a joint birthday party. And we actually had the Ed in the building on a Friday night. And the dynamic of the party was honestly what we were looking for. I invited most of my friends who were mostly black, and Mary Helen invited most of her friends who were mostly white, and just to see everybody getting along, everybody hanging out, vibing off each other, and just interacting in a nice area where there's not a space for in Chattanooga. It was really awesome, and it was great to see.
And one of the things we did is we set up some activity stations because we didn't know how easy it would be for people to start up conversation with each other. So we had something where people had to put their hand up on the wall. There were 2 handprints on the wall, and you had to do it with someone you didn't know and talk to each other until you weren't strangers anymore. And then we had something else where you had to sit down and draw someone's portrait across from you without looking at the page. So everybody's were just super goofy looking, which was really fun. And then we did this other thing where we left a recorder in the closet, and we asked people to leave a message for us. And so I was listening back to all these messages after the party, months after the party.
I still haven't heard them.
You still haven't heard them, except for this one. And one of them I heard, one of my friends was in the closet, and she was recording, and then 2 of Eddie's friends walked into the closet, and they started having this conversation together that I'm going to play for you.
Recording. We're supposed to ask this question. You want to join me?
What are you going to do for your 30th birthday?
I don't know. I think ideally I would have a party like this. I mean, I don't have friends, all these friends, but
But it's 2 people though, so
something like this.
It's 2 people, so you got 2 different groups.
Friends together.
And so what you're hearing there, I think, is the elephant in the room of that interaction is that my friend is both of our friends know that my friends are mostly all white people and Eddie's friends are mostly all black people, and that they wouldn't normally go to a party that was this kind of mix of people because it is pretty unusual here. And so they're saying they wouldn't be at a party like this unless it had been intentional.
And everybody had a blast, and of course including me and Mary Helen. So when the night was over and the party was over, nobody wanted to leave. So after that, we went to Pickle Barrel and we hung out. We chatted some more, vibed some more.
Ate some
everybody
nachos.
was just soaking it in because, like we said, it's nowhere that everybody can just come together and have these type of conversations. So nobody wanted the night to end. So it was a long night for us.
And since the party, both of our friends just were talking about it all the time, and they were begging us to do another party. And so we eventually did, I think, in April, last month, we set up another event. We called it Speed Friending, and we very intentionally reached out to different kinds of people to get them in the same room together. And it was kind of like speed dating, but for friends. So we had a bunch of funny question prompts, and we would ring the bell, and then you had to sit next to somebody else, and that party was great too.
Yeah, so we want to keep doing these type of events, and we're actually looking to form a committee. So if any of you guys are interested in forming this committee, being part of it, just let me and Mary Helen know. But I know some of you guys may be wondering, all right, social gatherings, that's cool and all, but what does that really do? Well, at the end of the day, it helps alleviate stereotypes. You meet people, you might meet them at a bar or a lounge or a nightclub or whatever like that, but you have so many distractions around. You have loud music, you may have drinks or whatnot, so you really can't get to know anybody like that in a nightclub or a lounge. So that's why we want to start having these type of events so that you can have those conversations without all the extra distractions so that you can actually get to know somebody.
And so back to this idea of serendipity. I think it was serendipitous that we met each other and that we had probably been in the hospital and nursery together. But I think that's sort of where the serendipity ends. After we realized the birthday, we had to be really intentional about doing something with our connection and building a friendship, and also trying to create a space for other people to make these connections. And there could be all sorts of serendipitous connections between people here in Chattanooga that they'll never know because they'll never connect with each other. So what we're trying to do is build a space for people to connect.
Yeah, and no strings attached, just for the pure goodness of humankind. That's what we're trying to do. We know at the end of the day we're not going to, end segregation or racism or things like that, but, we feel like we can do our little part to try to help out.
And so we actually made a podcast episode about our story. If you want to check it out, it'll be out soon. It's on Neighbors podcast, so you can subscribe to that. It's from Nashville Public Radio. And you can also look at our Facebook page, which we just put up yesterday, so we're the only members in it. It's not lame, I promise.
Please join, guys.
But it's called Friend Up Chattanooga. So join that, and we'll put our next event on there if you want to come to it. That's all. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.